The millionaire's baby bit every nanny, but smiled at this maid. For the past 6 months, 15 nannies had come and gone from Ethan Cole's mansion, most of them leaving injured. The latest one had just fled through the iron gates, her right arm wrapped in a napkin, droplets of blood staining the snow as she disappeared into the fading light. From the upstairs office, Ethan Cole stood behind the tall glass window, watching her run. His face was expressionless, his eyes hollow from months of sleepless nights. Behind him, the elegant workspace was littered with empty coffee cups and papers covered in code, remnants of a man who once built empires from logic, now defeated by something as small and fragile as a child. His phone buzzed. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. The staffing agency says there's no one else willing to take Noah's case." It was Mrs. Miller, the housekeeper. Her voice trembled. Ethan closed his eyes. He'd heard this too many times. Every week, someone quit. None lasted more than 3 days. Then her worried tone returned. "Sir, this morning Noah bit the pediatrician. I think it's worse than we thought." Ethan pressed his palm against the desk. Noah, 18 months old, had terrified every adult in the house. From nannies to doctors, even Mrs. Miller, who had raised 3 generations of the Cole family, had been bitten trying to comfort him. He looked up toward the ceiling. From above came the sound again. Noah crying. The sound echoed through the long hallways like an open wound that refused to heal. He had tried everything: therapy, lullabies, smart toys, even monitored sleep sessions, but nothing helped. Then Lily came to mind. His wife. She had died in a car accident returning from a book signing. Noah was just 6 months old. Her death hadn't only taken away Ethan's wife. It had stolen Noah's mother before the boy ever had a chance to remember her. The doctors called it early maternal loss trauma. They spoke of attachment disorders, emotional regression, infant trauma. Cold words that meant nothing to a man watching his son fall apart. "Mr. Cole," Mrs. Miller's voice returned, hesitant. "If I may, perhaps you should consider a specialized center. There's one in Vermont. They treat children with post-traumatic behaviors." Ethan said nothing. The thought of being away from Noah crushed his chest. Since Lily's death, Noah was the only thread keeping him tethered to life. Losing him would mean losing what little remained of her. A sob broke the silence from upstairs, then another, sharper, turning into a wail that tore through the walls. Ethan set the phone down and climbed the marble stairs. He knew that cry too well. It wasn't hunger or fatigue. It was fear. He stopped before the nursery door, took a breath, and turned the handle. The room was washed in pale light. Toys scattered across the floor, some broken from tiny bursts of rage. In the crib stood Noah, fists gripping the wooden bars, face flushed red, eyes glistening with fury and confusion. When he saw his father, he reached out, crying harder. Ethan stepped closer, voice trembling. "I'm here, son. It's okay." But as soon as he touched him, Noah sank his teeth into his wrist. Pain shot through, but Ethan didn't pull away. He only looked at his son, tired eyes full of heartbreak. "So scared, aren't you, Noah?" he whispered. He sank into the rocking chair by the window, the same chair Lily had once used to nurse their baby. Her photograph sat beside it, her smile soft, her arms wrapped around a newborn. "I'm sorry, Lily," Ethan murmured. "I'm failing you." Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, the cries of a frightened child echoed through the grand, empty house. A sound of despair, yet also the beginning of something unseen. Morning came colder than usual in the quiet suburbs of New York. A thin veil of mist drifted across the snow-covered garden, clinging to the glass walls of the Cole mansion like a gray shadow. Pale winter sunlight glimmered against the bricks of the courtyard, but couldn't chase away the heavy silence that wrapped around the house. Upstairs, Ethan sat by the window, a cold cup of coffee in his hand. He hadn't slept. Noah's cries still echoed in his mind like a wound that refused to heal. At the gate, a bus stopped. A young woman stepped down, pulling a worn suitcase, clutching her coat against the biting wind. Her name was Clara Ruiz, 25, a Mexican-American housekeeper sent by an agency to work temporarily for the Coles. She'd grown up in a crowded apartment in Queens with 4 siblings, used to the noise of traffic, the smell of cheap food, the chaos of working-class life. But this place was nothing like home. Too quiet, too perfect, too lifeless, as if sound itself had been erased. The iron gate opened. Mrs. Miller, the gray-haired housekeeper, met her with a firm, weary gaze. "You're Clara Ruiz?" "Yes, ma'am." "You clean the ground floor, dining area, kitchen, and east hallway. You do not go upstairs. You stay away from the child's room. If you hear anything, ignore it. Understand?" Clara blinked, surprised but polite. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Miller studied her for a moment, then turned back inside, her shoulders trembling slightly. Clara entered the house. The air was warm from the fireplace, yet the chill of emptiness seeped through everything. White walls, polished marble floors, furniture arranged with surgical precision. No trace of a child, no toys, no drawings, not even the faint scent of milk. Only order, only silence. She began her work. The soft sound of the mop gliding over the floor was the only thing alive. Occasionally, footsteps echoed from upstairs, slow, heavy, then gone. At lunch, while Clara wiped the kitchen counter, the cook, a large man with kind eyes, leaned close and muttered, "New girl, huh? A bit of advice, don't go upstairs. The kid doesn't like strangers." "How much does he not like them?" she asked. He sighed. "Enough to bite," then walked away. Clara frowned. She had spent her life caring for other people's children. The neighbors' toddlers when their mothers worked nights. Her little brother when he was afraid of the dark. She had never feared a child. She believed every tantrum hid a reason, every scream a story. But what could drive a baby to terrify an entire house? Later that afternoon, while collecting laundry, a sudden thud from upstairs made her freeze. Then came a sound. Crying, faint but raw, the kind that cut straight through the chest. She stood still. Mrs. Miller's warning echoed in her mind. "Do not go upstairs." But the cry came again, weaker, desperate. Clara set the basket down and hurried toward the staircase. Her steps echoed softly. At the end of the hallway, one door stood ajar, white light spilling through the crack. Inside, the sobs trembled like the voice of a child too tired to scream anymore. She pushed the door open. The nursery was in disarray. A toppled bookshelf, toys scattered across the carpet, a few broken in two. In the middle of the chaos sat Noah, small and trembling, his cheeks flushed red, tears soaking his collar. He clutched a torn, stuffed animal, gasping between sobs. Clara froze for a moment. The sight hit her chest like a weight. She didn't move closer. Instinct told her any sudden motion would only scare him more. Slowly, she sat down on the floor, keeping a safe distance. Her voice came soft, gentle, almost a whisper. "Hey there, I'm Clara. It's okay. I won't hurt you." Noah lifted his head, eyes wide, wary. His breathing came quick, his tiny chest rising and falling. He said nothing, only shrank back slightly as she shifted half an inch forward. Clara smiled faintly. Her hand slipped into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small, worn picture book, the cover showing a yellow duckling lost among tall grass. "I have a story. Would you like to hear it?" Her voice was calm, steady, warm. Noah didn't answer, but his gaze softened. Clara opened the book and began to read. Once upon a time, there was a little duck who got lost in the rain. He wandered through the woods, asking every animal, "Have you seen my mom?" But everyone was too busy to stop and listen. Her voice flowed gently through the room, like a lullaby in slow rhythm. The air seemed to change, less sharp, more human. Noah's sobs quieted. He watched the pages turn, his wet lashes fluttering as curiosity replaced fear. Clara paused for a breath, smiling. The duckling didn't give up. He kept walking until he heard a voice he knew, his mother's, calling from across the lake. Noah blinked, his small fingers unclenched from the stuffed toy, and slowly, hesitantly, he reached out. His hand brushed the hem of her apron, a light, trembling touch of trust. Clara didn't move away. She let her fingers gently touch his. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm right here." Noah leaned forward, resting his head against her knee. Within minutes, his breathing slowed. Then, softly, he fell asleep. Clara sat there motionless, afraid even to breathe. The peace that settled over the room felt unreal, like a fragile miracle she might break if she moved too quickly. She looked down at the sleeping child, her heart tightening with something tender and wordless. He wasn't angry. He was lost, just like the little duck in her story. As she gently pulled a thin blanket over him, a presence made her turn. Ethan Cole stood in the doorway, hand gripping the frame, his face pale and stunned. He didn't speak. His gaze was fixed on his son, on the rise and fall of that tiny chest, the serenity that had been absent for half a year. In that moment, it was as if time itself stopped. Clara straightened, startled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cole. I heard a noise, No," he interrupted, voice low and rough. "Don't apologize." He stepped closer, eyes never leaving Noah. "He's asleep?" Clara nodded. "Yes, I think he just needed someone to stay." Ethan stood there for a long moment. The golden afternoon light fell across his face, softening the lines of exhaustion, and for the first time in months, there was something new in his eyes. Hope. They both remained silent. But in that stillness, both of them knew what had just happened wasn't luck. It was the beginning. Small, fragile, but profoundly real. The room was wrapped in a soft hush. The only sounds were the child's steady breathing and the faint whistle of wind outside the window. Ethan Cole stood motionless at the doorway, afraid that even a single movement might break the fragile peace before him. For 6 months, his house had been filled with noise, crying, screaming, doors slamming. But this silence was something new. Beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. Clara turned slightly and saw him. She rose quickly, meaning to apologize, but Ethan raised a hand. "Don't," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't wake him." They stood there for a moment, suspended in the quiet. Light fell across Ethan's face, drawing shadows beneath his eyes. Clara saw in him not the confident image of a tech billionaire, but the exhaustion of a man who had walked too long in darkness. He looked down at Noah, and something in his gaze softened. "What did you do?" he asked after a pause. His tone wasn't accusing, just astonished. "Nothing, sir," Clara replied softly, still holding the small picture book. "I just told him a story." A story? About a little duck who lost his mother. She smiled faintly. I think maybe he saw himself in it. Ethan didn't respond. He looked at his son, then at the young woman before him. Her small frame, calm presence, eyes warm as autumn. Something inside his chest loosened, as though someone had quietly opened a door that had been locked too long. Since Lily died, he began, then stopped, the words catching in his throat. He hasn't slept like this. Clara lowered her gaze. She didn't need to hear the rest. The grief in his voice filled the room, thick and heavy and utterly alone. A light breeze stirred the curtain. Clara stepped forward, gently pulling it closed so the light wouldn't wake Noah. When she turned, Ethan was still watching her. For a fleeting second, he saw something in that simple act. Care. The kind of quiet care he hadn't seen since Lily. Your name's Clara, right? Yes, sir. Thank you. Two simple words, but his voice trembled slightly, as if he were speaking them for the first time in months. Clara nodded, her eyes warm, steady, unafraid. At that moment, Mrs. Miller appeared in the doorway, breathless. Oh, dear Lord, Miss Ruiz. I told you never to come upstairs. Clara turned quickly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller. I heard a noise. I was worried. Mrs. Miller was ready to scold her, but when her gaze fell on Noah, sleeping peacefully, she froze. Mr. Cole, is he? Ethan nodded. He's asleep. The old woman pressed a hand to her chest, tears glinting in her eyes. 6 months, she thought. 6 months since the last time this house had been so still. When Mrs. Miller left, Ethan remained by the crib. I've tried everything, he said hoarsely. Doctors, therapists, music, medication, nothing worked. And you just told him a story. Clara smiled faintly. Sometimes it's not about what you do, sir. It's about being there. Ethan looked at her, absorbing the quiet wisdom in her words. There was nothing professional about her manner, nothing trained, only instinct, empathy, and something that felt like truth. After a pause, Clara spoke again, her eyes still on Noah. He's not angry, Mr. Cole. He's afraid. Afraid that everyone who touches him will disappear. The words struck Ethan like a soft blade, gentle yet cutting deep. He knew she was right, because that fear wasn't only Noah's, it was his too. He was terrified of caring again, of loving again, of losing again. He drew a breath, steadying himself. Miss Ruiz, I don't know how you did this, but maybe you should stay, at least for a few more days. I'll call the agency. Clara hesitated. But I was only hired to clean, sir. And now, Ethan said quietly, you're cleaning something far more important than this house. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Their eyes met once more. Gratitude in his, compassion in hers. Neither of them realized it yet, but in that single moment, a fragile thread had been woven between two lonely hearts. The next morning, sunlight poured softly through the nursery window, brushing across Noah's cheeks. The little boy stirred, his lashes fluttering. After the first deep sleep in months, his face looked peaceful, almost angelic. Outside, Ethan Cole sat in the rocking chair, having stayed there all night. He was afraid that if he moved, the silence would vanish. Noah's eyes slowly opened. He blinked, confused, until his gaze found Clara Ruiz, who was sitting quietly beside the crib. Instead of crying, as he always did, he reached out a small, trembling hand toward her. Clara froze. When she gently touched his fingers, Noah gripped hers tightly, not biting, not pushing away, just holding on. It was as if, in the dream he'd had, he'd decided she wouldn't leave. Ethan watched, something warm and fragile rising in his chest. For the first time in months, he felt hope. Over the next few days, Clara stayed longer at the house. Ethan observed from a distance, standing quietly at the doorway. He had only allowed her to interact with Noah because the boy seemed to trust her, but soon he realized that what Clara brought into the house wasn't just patience. It was gentleness that changed everything. She didn't use any special techniques. She simply did ordinary things with extraordinary care. She sang soft Spanish lullabies her mother once sang to her, her voice low and warm. She taught Noah colors and shapes, letting him sit in her lap. She read picture books with animated faces, and Noah giggled, a sound that filled the air like sunlight. Ethan had never heard his son laugh. One afternoon, he froze at the sound. When he stepped into the living room, he saw Noah chasing bubbles across the carpet, laughing uncontrollably as Clara blew them from a small plastic wand. The child stumbled, fell, then stood up again, hands reaching for the floating spheres. Ethan stood in the doorway, afraid to breathe, afraid the moment might dissolve. His throat tightened, eyes stinging. He had forgotten how powerful a child's laughter could be, how it could bring a house back to life. Clara caught his gaze and smiled, saying nothing. She blew another stream of shimmering bubbles, and the sunlight filtering through the glass made them glow like tiny rainbows dancing around Noah. That evening, during dinner, Noah sat calmly in his high chair and ate almost an entire bowl of porridge. Ethan watched in disbelief. Clara sat beside him, patient and smiling, occasionally whispering little words to make the boy giggle again. Afterward, Ethan stepped outside into the garden, the soft glow of the path lights stretching across the stone walkway. Clara followed, holding her worn storybook. "You did something no one else could," he said quietly. "I owe you more than I can say." Clara shook her head. "I just waited, that's all. Noah's the one healing himself, not without you." She looked at him, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm just someone who opened the door. The only one who can really heal him is you." Ethan fell silent. Her words struck deep. He realized that all this time he had been trying to fix his son, as if Noah were a problem to solve, when what the boy needed was simply his presence. The next morning, he tried. When Clara placed Noah on the playmat, Ethan sat down too. At first, the boy was wary, eyes darting. Then, when Ethan rolled a small red ball toward him, Noah giggled. A real laugh, short and pure. Ethan laughed too, a sound rusty with disuse but real. That night, as Clara prepared to leave, Ethan stood by the door. "Clara," he said softly, "I want you to stay. Not just for a few days. Work here. Take care of Noah, officially." Clara looked surprised, then met his eyes. "I'll stay," she said after a pause, "on one condition." "What's that?" "You have to be part of it, because only a father can heal his child." Ethan stared at her for a moment, then nodded. For the first time in that house of long silence, hope truly returned. Since the day Clara agreed to stay, the Cole mansion began to change. Slowly, quietly, like sunlight finding its way through thick curtains. The transformation wasn't sudden, but it was real. A house once filled with crying now echoed with laughter. The patter of tiny feet down the hall, the soft humming of a young woman, and the deep, careful voice of a man learning how to be a father again. Ethan Cole, who had spent his life mastering algorithms and business deals, now struggled with the simplest of things. He learned to hold his son without making him cry, to prepare milk without spilling, to change diapers. His first attempt a comical disaster that left the nursery in chaos, and Clara laughing so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. Her laughter filled the kitchen like sunlight, and Ethan, startled, found himself laughing too. For the first time in months, it was genuine. Every morning, Clara taught Noah new words, names of colors, toys, shapes. Ethan sat nearby, watching silently, sometimes joining in clumsily, earning a burst of giggles from the little boy. When Noah took his first wobbly steps, Ethan crouched low to catch him, his hands trembling as though he were holding the entire world. At night, the house no longer felt empty. Warm light spilled from the living room where Clara and Noah read picture books while Ethan sat across from them, listening. Clara's voice was soft, velvety, full of life. When she paused, Noah smiled, and Ethan found himself smiling too. The shadows in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something gentler. Clara had become the quiet heartbeat of the home. Fresh flowers appeared on the dining table, the smell of cookies drifted through the air, and gentle music played from the speaker that once streamed only business calls. But with life's return came another feeling, subtle, fragile, and unspoken. Ethan noticed that every time Clara entered the room, his chest felt lighter. When she laughed, the world seemed less sharp. He didn't dare look too long or say too much. Sometimes, when she knelt to tie Noah's shoes, a strand of hair would slip over her cheek, and his heart would skip for reasons he couldn't explain. Clara sensed it too. She wasn't naive. She knew the boundaries between them, the gap between their worlds, the billionaire CEO and the girl who cleaned his floors. Yet what scared her most wasn't that distance. It was how easily her heart had begun to betray her. One late afternoon, the garden glowed under the golden light of sunset. Noah chased a butterfly across the grass while Clara followed behind, and Ethan sat on the steps, a cup of coffee in hand, watching them. The breeze played with Clara's hair, sunlight kissed her skin, and for a moment, she looked like a piece of the daylight itself. Ethan realized he hadn't felt this peaceful in years. When Noah tripped and fell, Clara ran to him, gathering him into her arms, whispering comfort. Ethan joined them, brushing dirt from the boy's shirt. All three of them laughed, and when Ethan looked up, his eyes met Clara's, warm, close, and charged with something neither dared name. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Ethan stood on the porch under the moonlight. The garden shimmered silver beneath the stars. Clara stepped out quietly, holding a blanket for the boy, but stopped when she saw him. They stood side by side in silence, the air filled only with the sound of night. "Thank you, Clara," Ethan said softly, "for everything." She smiled. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," he said, turning toward her. "You did what I couldn't." Clara met his eyes, the moon reflecting in the brown of hers. "No one's perfect, Ethan. But I think you're learning fast." They both laughed. It was light, effortless, but beneath it, something tender stirred, unspoken, fragile, yet undeniable. That house, once drowned in sorrow, now pulsed with life again. Yet within its laughter, two hearts beat quietly, hiding what they dared not confess, afraid that one wrong word might shatter the fragile peace they had just begun to build. Time passed, and peaceful days followed one another in the Cole mansion. Winter faded, the snow melted, and the first blades of green grass pushed through the soil under the warm sun. In the garden, Noah had become lively and curious, calling Dad, running unsteadily around the fountain, laughing every time Clara chased after him. That laughter was music to Ethan's ears, proof that maybe, just maybe, life still had something beautiful left to give. The house no longer sheltered sorrow. It had become a home. Mornings smelled of warm pancakes, evenings filled with soft music and bedtime stories. Ethan often left work early, eager to return home, to read with Noah, to listen to Clara's lullabies. One Saturday morning, as Clara cleaned the kitchen, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Miller answered and returned, saying, "There's a young man asking for you, Miss Ruiz. Says he's your brother." Clara wiped her hands and walked to the foyer. Standing at the door was a tall, thin young man with bright eyes and an easy smile. "Miguel!" she exclaimed, rushing to hug him. "You disappeared for a whole month," he teased, laughing. "I thought you'd gone back to Mexico." Ethan descended the stairs, smiling at the reunion. Clara introduced them. "Mr. Cole, this is Miguel, my brother. He just got a full scholarship to MIT." Ethan extended a hand. "Congratulations, that's impressive." Miguel shook it, shy but polite. At lunch, Ethan invited him to stay. The meal was warm and cheerful. Noah seemed fascinated by Miguel, handing him toys and babbling. Clara felt her heart swell with quiet pride. She hadn't seen her brother smile like this in years. After lunch, Miguel asked to walk around the garden. Clara joined him, the two strolling along the path by the pond. The sunlight shimmered on the water, but there was a hint of concern in Miguel's eyes. "Are you living here now, Clara?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm working for the family, taking care of Noah. He's a sweet boy." "And the father?" Clara hesitated, then said softly, "He's a good man, a devoted one." Miguel stopped walking. "That's not what I meant." His voice dropped lower. "I meant the way you look when you talk about him." Clara looked away, her reflection trembling in the pond. A faint breeze carried the scent of lavender from the garden. "You're imagining things, Miguel." "No," he said gently. "I see it, and it scares me." She stayed silent. Miguel stepped closer, his tone firm but kind. "You forget who they are, Clara. You're the housekeeper, and he's a billionaire. Do you know what people will say if they find out? They won't see your heart. They'll see ambition." Clara bit her lip, fingers twisting in her apron. "I don't want anything from him, Miguel. His wife is gone. His son lost his mother. You don't understand. There are kinds of pain money can't touch." "I do understand," Miguel replied softly. "But love and compassion aren't the same thing. If you let your heart confuse them, you'll be the one hurt first. And then, that child too." The words hit her like a quiet blow. She knew he was right. She knew the line she had drawn in her heart was already fading, and it terrified her. That afternoon, when Miguel left, Ethan walked him to the gate. He congratulated the boy again, praised his talent, his future, but Miguel's expression had changed. "Mr. Cole," he said quietly, "I know you're a good man, but my sister, she feels too deeply. Please don't give her another reason to break." Ethan froze, caught off guard. The words echoed in his head long after the gate closed. That evening, Clara sat reading to Noah in the living room, her voice gentle and low. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching. She seemed different, quieter, distant, her smile a little thinner. When Noah fell asleep, she put the book down and turned to leave. Ethan stopped her. "Did your brother say something to you?" She paused, then answered softly, "He just reminded me that some things shouldn't go too far." Ethan said nothing. In that silence, he realized he was standing at a threshold he was afraid to cross, because once he did, there would be no going back. Outside, the wind stirred the lavender in the garden, carrying its scent through the window. And within the house that had only just come alive again, a small crack, delicate but dangerous, began to form in two trembling hearts. In the days following Miguel's visit, something subtle shifted in the Cole mansion. Clara still came to Noah's room every morning, still sang and read stories, but her laughter was quieter now, her eyes avoiding Ethan's whenever he looked at her. He noticed the change, and it weighed on him, like a wall had risen between them, invisible yet impossible to cross. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Ethan stepped outside to the veranda. The early summer wind carried the scent of jasmine. Clara was folding towels at the garden table, the soft light spilling over her brown hair. He approached, voice low. "I don't see you smile like before." She looked up briefly. "I'm fine, Mr. Cole." "Clara," he said, her name bare, his voice unsteady. "What's wrong?" She placed the towel down, fingers tightening. "Nothing. I just think it's time for me to leave." He froze. "Leave?" She nodded. "Noah's better now. He laughs, he sleeps, he eats well. I think my work here is done." "No," Ethan said quickly, stepping closer. "No one can replace you." "But I'm just a maid, sir," Clara murmured, her gaze dropping. "I don't belong here." Ethan was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "You're wrong. You belong where Noah is, where I am." The words escaped him before he could stop them. Clara's eyes widened, part surprise, part pain. "Please don't say that, Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he corrected softly. "Call me Ethan." She shook her head. "No, we can't." The wind stirred, lifting her hair, her dress fluttering slightly. Ethan took another step, his eyes full of something he could no longer hide. "I tried to deny it, but I can't. You make me want to come home early. You brought laughter back to my son, to this house. And more than that, you make me believe I can love again." Clara's eyes glistened. "Don't say that, Ethan. Do you know what people would think? The billionaire and the maid? I don't want to be your scandal, and I don't want Noah to suffer because of me. You think I care what they say? You might not, but Noah will. He'll grow up hearing that his mother used to clean his father's floors. Can you bear that?" Her words cut deep. Ethan said nothing. He hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered how cruel the world could be. But right now, all he wanted was for her not to walk away. "Clara, I don't care about anyone else," he whispered. "Since you came, my son and I started living again. And that," she said, her voice trembling, "is why I have to leave. Because if I stay, I won't be strong enough to go." She turned, tears slipping down her face. Ethan reached out but stopped halfway. He knew, if he asked her to stay, he would destroy the peace she had given him. The next morning, the house was silent again. Clara packed her things in the small room downstairs. Mrs. Miller stood by the door, eyes red. "Are you sure, Clara?" "Yes," she whispered. "I have to go. The boy will miss you. I'll miss him too." Ethan didn't come to say goodbye. He couldn't. He stood in Noah's room, holding his son, watching through the window as the taxi rolled away. Noah had just woken up, still sleepy, but when he saw Clara's silhouette fade beyond the gate, he began to cry, softly at first, then louder, calling her name in broken syllables. Ethan held him tighter, feeling the sting of tears on his own face. The gate closed, and the house, once so full of life, fell silent again. But this silence was different, not cold, but aching. The kind that comes when something precious is gone. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of jasmine through the air, the scent she had loved. And Ethan knew, as he stood there with his son in his arms, that some people come into our lives only to show us what love feels like. Before leaving, as quietly as morning light fading from the sky. Since Clara left, the Cole mansion had fallen silent again. No more soft humming from the living room. No scent of freshly baked cookies. The glass walls reflected cold morning light, and every corner of the house felt empty, as if it had lost its heartbeat. Noah changed. He smiled less, slept poorly, often woke in the middle of the night crying, calling out in his sleep, "Ka-ra," a broken word that pierced Ethan's heart. The boy didn't understand loss, but he felt it deeply. During the day, Ethan buried himself in work. Meetings, reports, numbers. He tried to drown in them, but the truth followed him everywhere. He missed her. Her voice, her smile, the calm in her eyes. At a company charity gala, he met Isabella Green again, his executive assistant. She was everything ideal, intelligent, composed, elegant. She had been by his side since the early days of the company, understanding him better than anyone in the business world. Seeing him alone by the terrace, she approached, smiling gently. "You look tired, Ethan. Maybe it's time to start caring about yourself again." He gave a small laugh. "Work is the only thing that keeps me standing." "Maybe," she said, sipping her wine. "But people can't live in emptiness forever. Sometimes you have to let someone fill the space." She wasn't flirting. She was simply kind, someone who had watched him struggle in silence. Weeks passed, and they began to have dinner together. Ethan didn't call it dating. It was just conversation, something to distract him. Isabella never pried. She spoke of projects, politics, and plans, safe topics, predictable comfort. One evening, they dined by the Hudson River. The lights shimmered on the water, red wine glowing in crystal glasses. Ethan was quiet, eyes fixed on the river outside, where the moonlight rippled silver. Isabella set down her glass. "You're still not over her, are you?" Ethan gave a faint smile. "There's nothing to get over. I've just gotten used to the silence." "It's not silence," she said softly. "It's missing someone." He didn't reply. Her words hit the truth he couldn't admit. After a pause, Isabella changed the subject. "Ethan, you should hire a live-in nanny, someone qualified, professional. You need stability for Noah and for yourself." Ethan looked up. For a moment, Clara's image filled his mind, sitting on the floor, laughing as Noah chased bubbles, her voice humming Spanish lullabies. Not just Noah needed her. He did too. "No," he said quietly. "No one can replace the person who made him laugh again." Isabella smiled sadly. "I know." She studied him for a long moment, then asked gently, "You don't love me, do you?" Ethan said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Isabella nodded slowly. "I once thought maybe I could help you forget. But now I know. You don't need to forget. You just need to find what made you feel alive again." He lifted his gaze. There was no anger in hers, only empathy. "Go to her, Ethan," Isabella said softly. "Before it's too late. Don't lose the one thing that's real." He inhaled deeply, the weight in his chest suddenly sharper, yet lighter somehow. He knew what he had to do. That night, he drove home. The house was still, the only sound the ticking of the old clock. Passing Noah's room, he stopped. The boy slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. "You miss her too, don't you?" Ethan whispered. "So do I." Moonlight spilled across the room, catching on a photo frame on the desk. Clara smiling, Noah in her arms, sunlight in their faces. Ethan brushed his fingers over the glass and whispered, "Wait for me." And in that quiet moment, he knew that by morning he would leave. Not for the office, but to find the woman who had brought life back into their world. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains. Ethan stood by the window, the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. He knew, if he didn't go now, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He walked into Noah's room. The boy sat on the floor, holding Clara's photo, tracing her face with his tiny fingers, whispering softly, "Clara." Ethan knelt, gathering his son in his arms. "Let's go see her, buddy." They drove out of the suburbs into the heart of New York. The glass towers gave way to rows of old apartment blocks, paint peeling, laundry hanging from windows. Queens, where Clara had grown up. Ethan had never been here before. The streets were narrow, uneven, alive with music and the laughter of children. But somehow it felt familiar, warm, human, like Clara herself. He stopped before an old red brick building. A rusted metal staircase led to the second floor. A middle-aged woman opened the door. A gentle face, eyes just like Clara's. "I'm sorry," Ethan said softly. "I'm Ethan Cole. I'm here to see Clara." The woman looked surprised, then noticed Noah in his arms. "Oh my, the little boy." She smiled kindly. "Come in, she's inside." In the small apartment, Clara sat by the window with a worn book. Hearing footsteps, she looked up and froze. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Ethan didn't speak. He simply stood there holding Noah, who instantly reached out his hands, calling, "Clara!" Clara rushed forward, taking the boy into her arms. Noah buried his face against her shoulder, giggling. Her voice trembled. "Did you miss me?" "I missed you too, sweetheart." Ethan watched them, emotion tightening in his chest. He stepped closer, his voice low, raw with everything he'd held back. "Clara, I came here to say what I should have said long ago." She turned to him, shaken. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan. This place isn't for you." "It doesn't matter where I belong," he said, stepping closer. "What matters is who I belong with." Clara shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "You don't understand. People will talk. They'll judge. And I can't let you be hurt because of me. Let me finish." He set Noah down, took her hands in his. "You didn't just heal my son, Clara. You healed me. Before you came, I wasn't living. I was surviving. You gave me a reason to come home, to smile, to believe again. And now I know. I love you." The words fell between them, simple and pure, breaking every wall that had stood in their way. The door creaked. Miguel appeared, tense. "You can't say things like that here." "Miguel," Clara began, but he interrupted. "Do you know what this looks like, Mr. Cole? Power, money, and a poor girl. People won't see love. They'll see scandal." Ethan turned to him, calm but firm. "I don't fear scandal. I've lost too much in life because I was afraid. I won't lose her too." Miguel stared at him, then saw something in the man's eyes, something honest, unyielding. After a long pause, he exhaled. "If she's happy, I won't stand in the way." Clara's tears spilled over. "Are you sure, Ethan? The road won't be easy." He smiled, squeezing her hand. "I've already been through hell, Clara. As long as you're with me, I'm not afraid." At that moment, Noah crawled forward, wrapping his tiny arms around Clara's neck. He looked up, his dark eyes shining, and said clearer than ever before, "Mama, Silence filled the room. Clara froze, her hands trembling as she held the child tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan stood beside them, eyes glistening. From the kitchen, Clara's mother appeared, smiling gently. "If you're going to love, darling, then love bravely." Clara looked at her mother, then at Ethan, the man who once carried loneliness in his eyes, but now stood full of hope. She nodded softly at first, then with certainty. Ethan clasped her hand, his voice steady. "Come home with me." "Home?" she whispered. "Our home," he said. "Ours." Outside, sunlight spilled over the old buildings of Queens, bathing the three of them in gold. And in that small, humble place, a love that had survived silence, distance, and fear finally found its way home. 3 weeks after Clara agreed to come back, life in the Cole mansion seemed peaceful again. Noah laughed more. The mornings were full of sunlight and coffee. But as happiness bloomed, a storm was already gathering. Quiet, cold, and cruel, the kind that always tests those who dare to love against the world. On a Monday morning, as Ethan was getting Noah ready for the park, the phone rang incessantly. Mrs. Miller rushed in, pale. "Mr. Cole, the press. They published everything." Ethan froze. He opened his laptop. On every major news site, photos flashed across the screen. Him, Clara, and Noah in the park, laughing. The headline blazed, "Billionaire Ethan Cole in love with his maid." Below it, a flood of comments. Speculation, mockery, cruelty. Clara stepped closer, scanning the screen, her face draining of color. "Oh my God." Her hands trembled on the edge of the table. Ethan shut the laptop and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "It's okay. We'll get through this." "No, Ethan," she whispered, tears welling. "They won't just attack you. They'll come after me and Noah." That afternoon, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. The room was cold, filled with stiff suits and sharper eyes. The chairman, Mr. Raymond, slid a newspaper across the table. "You realize what this could do to our image, don't you?" Ethan met his gaze calmly. "I love her. That's not a scandal." "Maybe not to you," another member said, "but to our investors, it is. We're giving you 3 months to prove this relationship won't damage the company's reputation." 3 months? Ethan repeated. "Yes. If after that the media frenzy doesn't settle or our stocks fall, you'll be asked to step down as CEO." Ethan stared at them for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Fine. 3 months. I'll prove it. Not with words, but results." That evening, rain began to fall. Clara sat by the window, watching the city blur behind the glass. Noah was asleep upstairs. Ethan stood behind her, silent. "You shouldn't fight them," she said softly. "You're risking everything you built." "The company can replace me," he said quietly. "You can't." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Ethan, people will be cruel. They'll call Noah the maid's child. They'll write lies. I can't let him grow up in that. We'll protect him. Together." Clara shook her head. "Maybe we should wait until things calm down. Postpone the wedding, the announcements. I don't want our love to become their weapon." Ethan stepped forward, taking her hands. "Clara, I lost my wife once because I was afraid. I won't lose you the same way. We've survived grief and loss. We can survive this. I'd rather lose my company than lose you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're crazy." "Maybe," he said with a soft smile. "Crazy in love with you." She laughed through her tears, resting her head against his chest. Outside, thunder rolled and lightning split the sky. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if he could shield her from the world. "I promise," he whispered into her hair. "No matter how fierce the storm gets, I'll never let go." Clara closed her eyes, her fingers clutching his shirt, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The rain pounded harder, wind howling through the night. But in that small space, they were unshaken, because what they had was no longer fragile magic. It was love, strong enough to stand firm in the storm. The storm of gossip lasted for weeks, but inside their home, love became their only shelter. Clara spent her days caring for Noah and standing beside Ethan through every meeting, every headline, every tense silence. They learned to endure with grace, to smile at each other through the noise, and in those quiet moments, Clara realized something she had never understood before. Love was not just emotion. It was courage. One afternoon, while tidying Ethan's office, she opened a drawer and found an old photo album. The leather cover was worn, the label faded. Lily Cole, Summer 2023. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photos of Lily, bright, smiling under the sun, her blonde hair dancing in the wind. In the middle of the album lay a folded letter, edges yellowed with time. Clara opened it gently. "If one day I'm no longer here, tell Noah his mother chose this, for him. I know the risk, but I will give birth even if it costs me my life. Because sometimes courage isn't about living longer, but living fully in the moment you are loved." Clara's breath caught. Tears fell onto the paper as she read those words again and again. It wasn't just sadness, it was revelation. Lily had risked her life to give birth to Noah, while Clara was about to give up her own chance at love out of fear. That evening, when Ethan came home, he found her sitting on the sofa, the album open on her lap. "I found this," she whispered. He stopped when he saw the cover, his eyes soft with memory. "She wanted Noah to know she fought for him," he said quietly. "She was brave," Clara murmured. "Yes," Ethan smiled faintly. "Lily was never afraid of anything. You know, I think she would have liked you." Clara looked at him in surprise. "Why?" "Because you're brave too," he said simply. "You love and you fight. For others, for what's right. Just like she did." The words struck deep. Clara turned to Noah, sleeping peacefully nearby. She smiled through her tears. "I don't want to be afraid anymore, Ethan. I want to live like Lily, bravely, meaningfully. We're not postponing the wedding." He blinked, startled. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, her voice firm. "If I run from love because of fear, then I betray everything we've fought for. But I don't just want to stand beside you. I want to build something good from it." Her eyes shone as she stood. "I want to start a foundation, the Lily Foundation, to help underprivileged children, especially those who've lost their mothers and families struggling with trauma. I can't change the world, but I can change a small part of it, like Lily did." Ethan stared at her, moved beyond words. "Clara, you're honoring her, but you're also creating your own legacy." His eyes glistened. "I'm proud of you." Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly. Clara met with PR teams. Ethan reached out to partners and investors. The same press that once ridiculed them now wrote new headlines. Ethan Cole and fiancé launched Lily Foundation to support children in need. A month later, at the board meeting, Ethan presented the foundation's impact report. Donations had flooded in, and the company's reputation had rebounded stronger than ever. Mr. Raymond, the chairman who had once doubted him, leaned back and said slowly, "It seems, Ethan, that courage may be the best strategy after all." Ethan smiled faintly. Not strategy, sir. Love. That night, when he returned home, Clara was in the living room with Noah. The little boy stood by the sofa, wobbling on his tiny legs. She moved to help him, but then Ethan entered, and as if drawn by the sound of his voice, Noah took one step, then another, before falling into his mother's arms, laughing. Clara burst into tears. Ethan rushed forward, gathering them both in his embrace, and in that moment, he remembered Lily's words. Courage isn't about living longer. It's about living fully in the moment you are loved. He kissed Clara's forehead, whispering, "You've done what she dreamed of. You turned love into a legacy." Clara smiled through her tears. "No, Ethan, we did." Outside, summer rain began to fall softly, thunder rumbling far away. Inside the house that was once filled with silence, there was now laughter, tiny footsteps, and the warmth of two hearts that had found courage not just to love, but to live. Because sometimes, the greatest legacy of courage is love itself, when it teaches us how to be whole again. Time passed faster than they expected. 3 months since the board's ultimatum. 3 months since the scandal that set the media ablaze. Yet instead of collapsing, Ethan and Clara had done the impossible. They stood firm, calm, and unyielding, proving that love, when true, doesn't hide. It endures. The first weeks were hard. Reporters camped outside their gates, lenses aimed at every move. But Clara refused to hide. She greeted them politely, holding Noah in her arms. In a brief interview, she said, "We're just a small family, and every family deserves love and respect." Her words spread quickly. Public opinion began to soften. Soon, instead of mockery, there was admiration. Photos of them filled the internet. Clara with Noah, Ethan shielding them from the sun. A viral post read, "True love doesn't care who you are. It only cares how brave you're willing to be." At work, Ethan poured himself into rebuilding the company's image, merging the Lilly Foundation's projects with the firm's social initiatives. Investors who once doubted him now watched the stock climb and the company's reputation soar. Meanwhile, Clara expanded the foundation's reach. She visited struggling neighborhoods, met single mothers, and spoke with families surviving trauma. Every story she brought home reminded them why they had fought so hard, to turn love into something that healed. One late afternoon, Ethan received a summons from the board. It was the final meeting, the one that would decide his fate. At the door, Clara held his hand. "You don't need to win, Ethan," she said softly. "You just need to stay true." He smiled, kissing her forehead. "They don't get to decide my heart." The meeting was solemn. Mr. Raymond began, "The world's been watching you for 3 months. What have you got to show, Ethan?" Ethan rose, calm and steady. "The company has grown 12%. Our stock hasn't dropped. But more importantly, we haven't just protected our image. We've built something real for people who need hope." On the screen behind him, images appeared. Children smiling, painting, healing, under the banner of the Lilly Foundation. The words beneath read, "Every child deserves a chance to heal." Ethan looked around the room. If love makes us better, if it makes a company more human, then it's not a liability. It's a legacy. Silence filled the room. Then Mr. Raymond nodded. "I think we have our answer." Ethan stepped outside, the evening sky glowing gold. Clara was waiting by the car, Noah in her arms. He rushed forward, embracing them both. "They approved it," he said. "Not just that, they want to sponsor the foundation." Clara's tears fell against his shoulder. "I told you. We just had to be brave." A month later, they held a small wedding in the garden behind their home. Simple and heartfelt, it felt less like a ceremony and more like a homecoming. Children from the Lily Foundation brought flowers, and Noah, wearing a tiny suit, carried the rings. He ran to Clara, smiling up at her. "Mama's so pretty." The autumn sun draped its golden silk across the garden behind the Cole mansion, the same place that had once held tears, now filled with laughter. After months of storms, today was their day of peace. A small, intimate wedding, simple, elegant, and warm. Clara's family had come all the way from Queens, her mother radiant with pride, and Miguel smiling, nervous but happy. When Clara walked down the petal-covered path, everyone stood. She wore a white dress, her eyes shining with quiet joy. Miguel held her hand, guiding her toward Ethan. He leaned close and whispered, half teasing, half serious, "If you ever make my sister cry, I'll find you." Ethan smiled, sincerity in his voice. "I'll make sure she only cries when she laughs." Miguel grinned, patted his shoulder, then stepped back to his seat, where his mother wiped her tears, smiling all the while. The ceremony took place beneath a maple tree, sunlight flickering through the leaves like blessings from heaven. Ethan and Clara faced each other, hands entwined. The officiant said gently, "Today, we witness not just two people joining, but two souls brave enough to love again after losing everything." When they exchanged rings, little Noah ran forward in his tiny suit, scattering flower petals everywhere, making the crowd burst into laughter. Clara scooped him up, Ethan kissed both of them, and for a moment, the world stood still. The next morning, newspapers carried the headline, "From loss to love, billionaire Ethan Cole believes in happiness again." No gossip, no ridicule, only admiration. Ethan cut out the article and framed it on his desk. When Clara asked why, he said softly, "Not because it praises me, but because it reminds me that some good things only come when you dare to love." 6 months later, the Lily Foundation had raised over $5 million, helping hundreds of children and families heal from trauma. The media called it the humanitarian miracle of the Coles, but for Ethan and Clara, it was simply a way to honor Lily, the woman whose courage had started it all. One June afternoon, Clara visited the foundation's new center, children painted in bright colors. A curly-haired girl handed her a picture, 3 stick figures under a sun, smiling. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, one word, family. Clara's throat tightened. She smiled, hugging the child gently. That evening, she returned home. Ethan sat on the floor with Noah, building words from wooden blocks. The boy focused, tongue between his lips. Finally, he stood, pointed at the letters, and said clearly, "Fa, mi, lie." The room went silent. Ethan froze. Clara covered her mouth, tears spilling down. Noah laughed and shouted proudly, "Family!" Ethan lifted him high, voice trembling. "That's right, buddy. Family." Clara wrapped her arms around them both, holding tight as sunlight streamed through the window. Outside, the same garden glowed in the sunset, the place where their story had begun, where pain had once lived, now bathed in warmth. Ethan looked out and whispered, "I used to think miracles weren't real, but then you came, and I realized the real miracle isn't something that falls from the sky. It's love. Love that makes us brave enough to begin again." Clara rested her head on his shoulder. And when two people believe in that love, they'll always find their way home. Noah looked up, giggling, wrapping his small arms around their necks. He repeated his new word, soft but sure. Family. The sunset wrapped around them. 3 souls once broken, now whole again. Beyond the walls, the world's noise faded. What remained was simple and eternal. True love is stronger than status, prejudice, and fear. Because in the end, the real miracle isn't perfection. It's the heart's courage to love, to trust, and to forgive.